so much for joining today's session on making access to data better by design. So just to recap on the entire data dialogue event that has been taking place since yesterday, we have been discussing several topics related to data, whether it be with respect to procurement, child protection, floods, budgets, or schemes. So these are a lot of civic engagement topics that have been discussed with respect to data. And if you look at the entire discussion of the sessions from yesterday, we have talked about three large factors. One is definitely data. Second is users and stakeholders. Now these can be data seekers or data contributors, or just like the largest ecosystem of data or people associated with data as well. And platforms and dashboard. But if you want to connect everything, what we are trying to solve is how data can be accessed by larger and diverse user buckets by interaction of a digital tool. As the mediator to be between data and users, then what kind of design and design process should be considered to make this process more efficient and user-friendly is something that we want to discuss in today's panel. What we will try to do is we try to have a discussion where we will try to demystify the process with respect to civic tech and how design can fit in well with civic tech platforms. For this, we have a very interesting panel today on board with us who have been experts with various key areas with respect to design. I would like to introduce them. We have here in person Professor Keyur. Professor Keyur is currently Associate Professor at Department of Design, IIT Guwahati. He holds a PhD in Gestural Interfaces for resource-scarce regions. He has also founded Embedded Interaction Lab, which is creating contributions aligned with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals in the areas of ICT, human-computer interaction, design thinking, problem-based learning, creativity, and sustainability. His primary interest areas are exploring novel interactions, methods, and experimenting with HCI, which are advances for societal innovations. Then we have Mr. Kiran Sabnis joining us from Pune. Kiran sir is co-founder, director, and UX strategy consultant at 2.47 Consulting Private Limited. He is also co-founder, managing director, and principal mentor at Gurumantra Academics Private Limited. His major areas are UX research, context mapping, field studies, services and system design, and he also runs something as boot camps and incubator mentoring as well. Then we have Ms. Manisha Phadke joining from Mumbai. Manisha ma'am is an alumnus of IDC. She has a professional career spanning for 30 years now in the design industry. She is keen on subjects like sustainable UX, the future of education, and people-centric digital transformation, for which she has also spoken at several conferences and webinars. Manisha ma'am has designed a curriculum to advance a transdisciplinary approach to humanizing technology with consistent and benchmark learning goals. In 2017, she founded a transdisciplinary school of design at NMIMS, deemed to be University Mumbai campus. So the school also envisions a professional and future-scoping design education that is multidisciplinary, collaborative, technology-permeated, and data-driven. And also the school offers a very unique undergraduate design program which is in humanizing technology. So that is the panel for today evening. Welcome to everyone. So I would like to start this session by setting a larger context that we'll be covering in today's session. So we believe that the civic tech market in India is poised to grow, and multiple entrepreneurs are beginning to engage on tough civic problems, and I would be happy to say that CivicDataLab is also one of those who we have been contributing to tough civic issues, something like budgets, law and justice, education, etc., where we are trying to make data accessible to civic and public sector, where they can improve the course of engagement with us. The reasons for this can be many, like maybe one of the things can be adoption of smartphones. Second is the tech talent, as we all know that India also stands as the third largest startup country in the world. And government incentives as well, like Indian government has focused on incentives to improve digital access, so the entire mission of Digital India coming in place. So it has also given opportunity to bring in a lot of civic tech development as well. The time, I would say, is quite interesting. to bring about a change in the quality of governance through the use of civic tech. So this use of civic tech can also dramatically improve the delivery of services to citizens and refine the Indian government's responsiveness to important civic issues. So as we are talking about civic tech platforms, on this note I would like to start this discussion with Professor Keyur. As we are in Assam, and Professor Keyur, we are aware that you have been associated with several projects related to Assam government, whether you have worked with Budget app or the state procurement portal. We would like to understand, your entire experience of working with government tech, especially in this geography of Assam. And secondly, also if you could show light on, how design can be practiced in a sector like government tech. Is the process quite different, and are there any limitations or challenges that we have to go through as designers as well?
Thank you. Yeah, I'm surprised. How did you guys know that I've been calling nice people to be on the platform? I don't know whether Jayan spoke about it or what, but okay. As far as government ecosystem, from a technology point of view in Assam is concerned, they have been doing, as in it's a starting phase. Frankly, we are probably a lot behind than Rajasthan, developed states like Rajasthan, Gujarat, Karnataka, Maharashtra and all. So that way we are lagging behind. But there is immense enthusiasm in general from a government perspective to really build technological ecosystems using software for solutions. So that's one very good thing. However, given that we are sort of late in catching the bus, there are a lot of constraints around how we are working. So frankly, the primary goal right now is to build features and functionalities for the government and not really thinking about whether they are user-centric or not, which is perfectly fine given that we have missed the bus or maybe we are a little late. So the idea is to build softwares and start making things work. And over a period of time now, the government entities also have realized that we need to think about users and we need to think about how to make systems intuitive and user-friendly. So this is what my experience is. So what they do is generally they build the software and then at one point of time they'll give you a call, Keyur, let's do you come as an advisory part and let's redesign this. And these are the real world examples I'm talking about. SPPP, which is State Public Procurement Portal. Then there is GRAS, which is gross, some of the counting system, I forgot the G part of it. So that's where you can pay taxes online, from a company perspective. And there are a lot of other software, like they're coming up with a book for teaching procurement processes for people. So all of it is something we have to design, develop it entirely first, and then give a call to Keyur saying that let's do something about it. Frankly, so this is where, while this is a challenging part of it, the good thing is there is a sensitization that we really need to build something which is user-centric. Of course, the processes is not the ideal processes that we would expect it to happen, but nevertheless, I am very happy about it that at least we are thinking from an end-user perspective. Apart from that, there are a lot of other challenges as well. So we, at least within my limited experience of working with some government entities, we are not really adopting the best practices of software development. And I'm really not talking about the design part of it, purely software development. And let me give you a very simple example. For a simple search, they would put a CAPTCHA, and which is an open platform. As in, these are all the tenders that are supposed to be public, right? So why would, I was just thinking, if I would be there, and if I want to search in an agriculture department in this particular smaller segment, there is a tender, and if I have to search because the tender has come maybe 2 months back, why would I enter a 6-digit CAPTCHA for just searching, which is anyways an open data, which is supposed to be public data, right? So this is my, I actually fought with I will not name it's a government body anyways who is developing it. I fought with them, why do you need CAPTCHA? The only reason they gave me, I will not get a security certificate, so that is I'm putting CAPTCHA. So then I gave an argument saying that, do you see Google having CAPTCHA, as in when you search for it or Gmail or anything? Then the response is, SBI mein likha hai, CAPTCHA aata hai. So, So I could not convince them, frankly. That's my experience. But having said that, all in all, within these limitations, there is a good sensitization. So I'm not able to 100% probably convince the government or maybe the development company that this is how you should really build softwares, or this is what every user does not have a smartphone, or every user does not have technological literacy to really adopt whatever you are building. But half of it are getting accepted. So that's something which is very good. But I'm hoping that in some period, 2-3 years, we will have software which are really very user-centric and catering to not just people from Guwahati, but maybe people from Changsai and very smaller places who probably have very low technology literacy.
So as you have already worked with these organizations, how did you go about understanding, because as you mentioned, the software is already developed and then we start the design process. And there is where we get the limitations, but still we also have to understand the users. So how do you start taking a call on that? Like how should you engage with the users in case we already have a platform in place?
Okay, well that's a very, I don't know if the reverse engineering is a correct word, but at least what I understand is, again I talk from a government perspective, is they would always involve some sort of a stakeholder. Like for example, Jatin is amazing, as in I'm not sure whether he's a techie, so I'm talking about Jatin Narlikar. I probably heard for the first time, apart from Jatin and maybe Kailash Karthik, he's now the DC Kamru. They were the people whom I have really seen talking about should we give a walkthrough to who is going to use the system, and this is probably for the first time I heard, which I was really happy. Otherwise it's more like I am the developer, I will design the system, you figure out how to use it. That's how it works. So, but Jatin making that statement to his team, saying that whatever Keyur is suggesting, let's really put it across people, or not people, but at least call up 5 people in the office and make them walk through this, and then we'll figure out what are the issues. So that way, things, as in with these proactive officers, things will work, I'm sure. But coming to specific to your question, I think currently I also don't have that liberty to really go to do a user-centered design, because frankly the timelines are very limited. Everyone wants to build everything yesterday, frankly. So, so the timelines are limited. So what I generally do is based on my own experience, given that I've worked a lot with rural areas and the expertise into NCI. I use my expertise and the people with some using my students doing some research here and there. We try and get an understanding of the user. Frankly, we are not been able to follow a very traditional user-centered design method, which ideally we should. But again, we always have challenges where everything is to be done yesterday. Yeah.
Yes. Thank you, Professor Keyur, for that. So based on this discussion, I'd just like to shift the gear to talk more about the design process and how can we apply this in civic tech sector for better data accessibility. So especially before we get into this entire process of designing the platform, there is an entire crucial process of understanding the users, and which is primarily an important objective, because you should know for whom are you building it and whether they are even being able to understand or access that platform well. So I would like to ask this to Kiran sir. Kiran sir, as you have been practicing user research for many years now in various domains, so most of the time what we have understood, and something what Professor Keyur was also mentioning, the key challenge we face is in order to convince the funders or organizations to even agree that we want to conduct a certain kind of user research process or a design research process. So just to put an instance, like last month we were doing a usability test for a state budget explorer. It was a prototype that we were testing out, and to our surprise, when we made the usability test public, we got like multiple participants, who enrolled for that usability testing, and they were not just domain experts, but an entire set of curious, maybe not domain experts, but just curious to know what is happening in the budget data. And it was surprising how they brought out points, we really want to know how government spends money and how government wants to, either they can seek any opportunities from that platform for themselves or for their organizations. So this is what I want to ask you, Kiran sir. Like, how do you look at this entire concept of user research in civic or social space for building civic tech platforms, or we can just call it like research for public good? And also, you can, if you could highlight on the importance of why user research or stakeholder research is important when we are catering to platforms where there are like diversity of users coming in place.
Okay. First of all, let me set the context right as far as my role is concerned. Though I worked for around 20 years in IT company wherein managing the complex enterprise applications or managing technology platforms or digital transformations or mobile apps, so on and so forth. My exposure to public or government projects is near zero. Okay, so let's understand that I don't have any experience as far as working on government projects is concerned. Nonetheless, got some experience in social enterprise work, and I can share some anecdotal data as far as my experience in social impact or some kind of NGOs like Rangde, Powerward, Urmi Foundation, and Tapas. As far as importance, or if we compare, for the sake of discussion about design for public sector vis-a-vis design for corporate world, if I may try to decipher your question. So basically, I thought working in public sector and working in public sector of India are two different things. Okay? Because when we were interviewing for my previous company, Tech Mahindra, when we interviewed 20 UX designers, 19 of them were working for British government. Okay? So, which is not possible in Indian context. Okay? In India, you hardly find someone who has actually worked in public space. Nonetheless, we are talking about public or government projects, if I may. I'm using this word a bit loosely, sorry for that, but we understand the context. Now, if we understand the complexity and the interlinkages in this public domain or government projects, as we all know, being a wicked, complex problem, it's very, very unpredictable. And I'm sure Gaurav and all you guys would be really many times getting frustrated, how this decision making happens. In the corporate world, understanding the stakeholders, understanding their actual stakes, typically a top-down approach is very predictable. You can easily find out who makes the shot, who takes the shot, and who to please, so as to say, quote unquote. So your research method or your concepts will get approved. Unlike in government projects, it's extremely difficult for or even in social sector. Okay, so being the system being so complex and the stakes involved are so diverse, it becomes very difficult. Second point, I thought, in the corporate world, and this is my experience, research component, and I've seen multiple companies, and now also I see. The research component in the corporate world is fairly less. If I may just put some numbers, so it would be 20-80, 20% research and 80% so-called conceptual design, wireframing, blah, blah, blah. In the social context, wherever we work, the focus was predominantly on research. And we spent around 80% on research component and 20% on implementation. It does not mean 20% is not important. But what we thought is research became very important when we work in social organization. Third point what we observed is, typical research methods don't work. In corporate, typical research methods work, that get hold of product managers, delivery guys, and sales guys, and CXOs in one conference room, ask questions, create questionnaire, go to users, have a focus group. It doesn't work. social context. That's my experience. You you need to be extremely flexible as far as method of research is concerned. Let me share my one experience quickly. We were doing work for Gawde, okay? And Gawde, as some of you would know, Gawde is a crowdsourcing platform in microfinance. So you can avail loans for the people who are below poverty. Now we decided that hey, let's go and do the user research in a place called as Pusat. Okay, go there, study, ask them questions, and we formed a kind of a tiger team, who would, for example, Jatin would take the notes and Kiran will lead the questions and somebody would record, so on and so on. And typically this works very well in the corporate world. When we went in Pusat and when we went into that community, the first thing what we heard is males are not allowed to enter in the community of minorities wherein only women stay. Right? So your entire approach of research goes for a toss. Then we had to invite someone who is a lady researcher and to get her on board and all such things. So the complexity and the overall complicatedness of the entire ecosystem is very difficult. So typical research doesn't work in that space. And you need to really flexible, extremely flexible in adopting and augmenting different ways of doing research in social context as compared to corporate work.
Thank you, Kiran sir. Before we move to the next thing, just wanted to pause and see if we have any questions so far.
So, I think both of you touched upon this point, especially I think Kiran sir said 19 out of 20 people did have experience of working in the Indian context. So, and you also being a professor, so I just wanted to ask you what, especially when it comes to civic tech, none of us who are working here had that experience of working with civic tech before and then deciding that this is how we will work now. So do you see that with the field growing in India, or I don't know whether it's growing or not, but still are students getting interested to know more on how we can bridge that gap between civic tech and learning about it during our graduation or whenever, learning about civic tech, learning about the tools that we use, or what exists, what doesn't exist, and how to bridge that gap.
So, are you saying that we should we build some kind of courses or some mechanism that they go out of comfortable zone and then maybe learn about government ecosystems and how to build solutions for government ecosystems, something of that sort?
Maybe a course or maybe collaboration with civic tech organizations or other NGOs who are which are in the civic tech stage.
Okay.
Something like that.
Yeah, so I think, so one thing, at least I can talk from IIT Guwahati perspective, we don't really have formal arrangement of that sort in any context about, government, formally being part of government ecosystem or NGOs or people like CivicLab doing some tremendous work, right? So, but what I have realized, so one certain thing is that we certainly need to have such mechanism in place. But informally, I have realized that each and every entity is very keen on doing it, whether it is students, professors, say CivicLab, or NGOs, or government. And I'm very, very much emphasizing on government because they are. They just don't know how to really reach out people, and governments also, institutes also don't know how to reach out people. And sometimes it happens that even if they reach out, there is no common synergies, or coming up with a common theme is sometimes becomes a little difficult, which is understood because academic setup is a lot freer setup where you get time and resources to explore, whereas in a government setup, governments change, people change things, so it's not a very ideal context. However, having said that, every of these entities are really keen on it. It's just a matter of probably 2 or 3 people in the right place at the right time coming together and sort of working out, a common theme. So, like the e-budget application, the first time that had come in Assam in 2018, I think that was the first one in India. The idea came from the finance ministry to me saying that can we do something about it, and I was, although there is no monetary part involved and anything, but because I thought that it's a very good initiative that government is taking, and it was not probably the CM's idea or finance minister's idea. They were on the loop, but it was idea coming from the officer saying that we should really build something where people can just download an application and learn a lot more about where is the money really going. So that came, and then we worked together. We built the first app, and what I understand is now every year they are using the same format and just changing the content, but the app is there. So fundamentally, people are keen on it, but there is no formal mechanism, and I agree we should have a mechanism because I see that everyone is interested in this. It's just that we don't have a formula, I don't know, something on paper that we really should.
Keyur, I'm just thinking, maybe some of, and being part of IIT or NID, I think it would be, I'm sure you guys would be doing maybe doing some collaborative hackathons with the government or crowdsourcing to the students and giving some kind of a projects to the students, which could be ongoing consulting projects of the faculty. I remember Keyur talking with somebody from NID, unfortunately the person is no more, like designing the coins for 1 rupee coin and 2 rupee coin for India. And we said that, hey, Samuel, it's not that great, hardly we can find the difference between 1 rupee coin and 2 rupee coin. And he said, come Kiran, I'll show you how many prototypes we had created. And he had created around, I think, 1,000 plus prototypes. And the point what I'm saying is, sometimes they are getting some projects wherein they can involve the students. But when the decision making comes, as you rightly said, it gets derailed or the push from the government for this design initiative may not be like that much. And also the NIT had started railway design as a concept. So they had got some funding, and it's a funny story, maybe we can talk later, but
is it okay if I jump in?
Yeah, please.
So just to answer your question, so there are different ways to approach it in education. You can also give it as an area. So actually we are a very young school, but we already have about 3 projects students have done in this area. So one is water management in slum in India, which is civic tech. And the other one is into real estate, that is a capstone project. So you can also infuse the areas that students work on as civic tech, and then student, researches and puts out a challenge to solve. But the awareness of the fact that there is an approach in a space of civic tech also can be infused without maybe formally going into a course. So that's what we're doing in our school. That helps.
So Manisha, are these projects funded by the Government of India or ministry somewhere, or are these some kind of a student-led projects, and then we approach the government?
These are student-led projects. We are now trying to approach Bombay Municipal DMC to see what we can do. It was appreciated at the CIR, but we have to take it ahead. Like Dr. Keyur said, there is sensitization, awareness, but the action taking in the government is coming a long way. I mean, we are getting there. We are better than 10 years ago, but we need to get there. And I think slowly, if you bring the project, instead of waiting for the funding to come from there, if you do a student project and approach it, you can actually see the result. And that might be a buy-in, easier buy-in, is how we are approaching it.
Right, yeah. I'll just maybe add one more point over here. So, Kiran, what you're saying is true. Probably, hackathons and all are very interesting mediums, and pushing some government problems in the hackathons would be interesting. So what I do generally is, I would involve students in any of my personal project, but that's frankly very limited because I would do project, maybe some students would be part of it, but on a larger umbrella, yes, we should have something like a hackathon or similar platforms onto which we can really provide government-related issues. And I'm sure government also would be very keen on coming on board and putting forward certain problems, and if something works out, maybe taking it from the solutions that develop, or maybe expanding the scope for the students as well. But yeah, some of the cases, what I understand is government is also very much funding. So whether it's a coin case or a railway case, what we are talking about, or the one which I'm working on, health workers, on maternal and child health care, or tuberculosis, or these kind of finance related applications. I don't see much of a problem from funding perspective. At least frankly, I have never had any issue with respect to funding. So government is keen to fund as far as there is synergy or there is a common aspect between the government as well as the educational, or rather any institutes in general. So yeah.
Thank you, Professor Keyur. So moving on, so another thing that comes up, that modern government is using, more and more digital tools to run workflows or digital initiatives to interact and provide services to users and citizens. One of the examples we just saw in the earlier one was getting the unified data platforms, or even during pandemic we were accessing certain platforms which were providing certain services to us or the citizens in general. So in this process, it makes time for more high-value interaction and thus increasing more and more users using these initiatives. So I just wanted to come to you, Manisha ma'am. While introducing you, I spoke about this term called people-centric digital transformation. So first of all, it would be nice if you could, help us understand what people-centric digital transformation is to our audience. And at the same time, if you could make us also understand, how it can benefit in civic tech platforms, especially platforms where we have a lot of data that users can use, and not just data, but we also try to build certain level of data analysis or data visualizations that can be directly used by people, by the users. So if you could just put light on that segment as well.
Sure. You've asked me a really long question. Bear with me, I'll try to make it as coherent and concise as I can. Right? So let's start with your first part where you said about digital tools and user satisfaction. Right? There are two key points here. One is digital tools to run workflows and interact with citizens on scale and accessibility. And the second point is making time for high-value interaction. So the first is maybe accessibility, but the second one is purposeful communication, right? So let's swing down to what you asked me about, what is digital transformation, right? If you see the dictionary meaning of transformation, it's about a change in form or appearance, right? But we could look at it as a change in outward form of experience. It could be composition or structure, or it could be change in character and condition, right? But the most digitization projects you see actually change the outward form and appearance. No? So they have, instead of data entry on the type, you are going to do it on a mobile, and it's an outward facilitator, right? Which could change a little bit of composition, how people are working, at what spaces they are working, and so on and so forth. But transformation means people. And if you want to transform people, you need to look at people from top to toe. So what's their mental model? What's their behaviors? What are they aspiring for? What are they doing at their job seat? What are you aspiring them to do? Are the skill set matching? Are their mental models matching? So these are some considerations we need to take before we take the plunge into digitization. But digital tools are basically enablers, is how I see it. But what you are changing is a lifestyle, is a workflow, is a way to do something, right? And that should be understood, I feel, right? If I can kind of give you example is the COVID app, right? When we had it at that crucial time, it was important that we manage the vaccinations, right? We don't pilfer, we manage it, right? That's fine. But later, could it be used as a community builder, as a change manager, as understanding what we can do in COVID? We could have used that platform to do a lot many things, you know. Right now, if I want to go and get my booster dose, it doesn't even tell me that, hey, you know, you're not age eligible. You know, I have to figure out because nothing really happens. So I think user centricity or people centricity is what's there. To answer the third part, if I could read your question, that whether digital tools, you mentioned something about digital tools and accessibility, right? So I don't believe that accessibility is a digital adoption, right? Just when you throw data doesn't mean it's accessible. It needs to be tuned and it needs to be granulated for consumption. That's what is accessibility. So if you consider this as a mere communication, if you don't give the word design and you say this is just mere communication, then there are critical factors you need to make a communication. It's always two-way. It's not one way. It's not what I want to tell the people, as I as the governance, I as the government want to tell, but it is how the citizen is also looking at what I'm trying to communicate and what's value add for me, right? Which is a two-way street. So to pitch in a little more is we see it from a governance point is a big sea of citizens, you know, in different states, different genders, different economic strata, in different spaces, different workload. But I think that each of them, or a cluster of them, are personas. They're people, yeah? And we need to look at them as that granulated data, like we do in the corporate, you know, to answer and spin off from what you asked Kiran. There is a parallel that I see, and we need to make that effort to look at people not as a sea of citizens, but as a few citizens belonging to a certain persona. You know, and that will probably help us by not sending a birthday message or a tax message and so on, but we actually feel that I can ask or I can look at the data that the government has given for something that I can benefit, you know, in the long run. And, you know, there's so many schemes, there's so many policies government is building, we don't really know, and that data can then come to us. So, to sum up, I think digital tools are just enablers. We need the right intent, which is the right spot, the right context that we want to do it, and it should be people-centric with data as a framework to be built on that drives both routine and meaningful communication, but using it as automatons would be a folly, is what I feel. And so people-centricity needs to be built in. And people-centricity, it doesn't mean empathy interviews. It means constitution of what makes people, which is well-being of people and environment and society. I hope that kind of answered what you asked me.
Yes, definitely, Manisha ma'am. That was a very interesting answer. Just to build on that, my colleague Jatin here will also like to elaborate on the secondary phase, you know, once we move from user research to actually building the product. What all approaches, I think that will also cover some points what Manisha ma'am was also mentioning. Jatin?
I'm audible? Yeah. So, being a product designer, like I would like to emphasize the challenge we face during the later part of our design process, that is ideation stage essentially, and creating actual prototypes and like keeping the data at the center. So once the research phase is done, and like if we get a chance to do it, we have a concrete problem or challenge to solve. Okay. Yeah. And this problem or challenge differs every time, you know, like depending on the use case and users we are dealing with. But there's one common thing. We like every time we do that when solving for these problems in one or the other way. We try to make the data accessible to our users in the easiest form possible. Okay, so I would like to ask Manisha ma'am and all our honorable panel members that how can we standardize our design solutions for all these data-driven civic tech platforms? Just to give you an example, like if you see e-commerce platforms, okay, they are serving different purposes, but one or the other way, like they are same in some ways. Like if you see, like there's a product catalog, there's a product detail page, then there's someone can, there's a whole checkout flow which someone can wish list, add items to their wish list, and all other things. In our case, what is there? Like there are data listings, there are data landing page, there are like people, there are people user would like to visualize their data. So like there are similarities. Like that was my question. Like how can we standardize our solution so that like user or our stakeholders like wouldn't surprise every time they visit different data platforms. Like they should work in the same way.
If I may say, Jatin, let's not use the word standardization. Let's use the word of patterns. Okay, patterns that have probably worked. So they have gone through the usability testing, and the users are using it, and those patterns can be then used commonly with data platforms, right? So what I'm trying to drive at here is to make a data platform, right? I feel that there are three things. There is one, capture, there is analysis, there is facilitation of creating data sets, right? Because it's an open platform. And the fourth could be visualizations and visualization tools, right? So often when I'm looking at certain government data, when we teach data visualization, I'm looking at data and I'm taking data sets which are available, I realize that there are points that are not captured. That doesn't make sense when we are trying to create a data set, right? So I think it's important that we look at platform design in all these three stages or four stages, and maybe more as you see. That's one. But before we do that, I think we still have to follow the same process of spot, design, prototype, and test. So which means we need to spot what we're doing this data platform for, and maybe some kind of quantitative quick research can probably give you varied applications for the data points that you are trying to make, right? Or are available in your platform, right? If it's something to do with only finance sector, or something to do with healthcare, and maybe healthcare with specific to TB and so on and so forth. I think the design of the capture of data points should also be included when you do the design part. What do I want? So I should. I briefly heard some person, speaker talk before, like there were geotags, but maybe geotags with time, temperature, habits will give you a better data set for a healthcare, right? But if you don't know the intent, we will not use all these data points. So I think that's one. Then how are we going to triangulate the data? These are varied data points, and there may be some ways to triangulate that. Like, to give you a very rudimentary example, since you said e-commerce, because you bought this, you can also see this, right? So it's a persuasive technique, but if you look at it, it's a triangulation of data set, right? And I think that if we could have patterns generated or certain sets generated for that, for giving some cohesive narratives in the point, then I think going forward. As designers, what we also learn is what do you do as future scope. So many people can solve here and now, but if we simulate what we need tomorrow, like simulate possibilities, we can also lead to a more holistic and future scope platform, right? And then the data set will be usable, will be enabling, and will be trustworthy. So why are we not going into government for data? Because we don't know whether we can use it, maybe the data points are not there, maybe it's not accessible, maybe we don't trust it. So if we find that lacunas and try to build it in this pattern of 3 points or 4 points, and again, how do you capture each point? I think over the time, since civic data in the audience, somebody said, is very young. Yes, I agree, it's very young, and it is the time that we should push that envelope. we will be able to build such patterns on how to design for civic data platforms, right? And this might do bit on how you can probably do that. Where accessibility is not whether it's reaching me, the accessibility is what do I do with it? And for profit, not for profit. Similar to I would go to a Google map now for not only traffic, but where are the petrol pumps, right? It's become something that I could naturally go to. So if we have to transform and popularize or democratize civic, tech and data both, we need to create a trusting want for it and a use case for it. And I think that will eventually move into not standardization, but more reliable patterns to design something. But we can probably begin with this.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Mr. Keyur, you would like to?
Yeah, no, great. So I'm not very big fan of having a standardized approach to anything, because every data has a different purpose. Okay, and how do you read that data and what you want to interpret out of that data is entirely different depending upon the data set that you have. So it's not a very good idea to have any standardized approach for any kind of a data. Okay, and I'm also not a very big fan of the example that you gave about e-commerce platform having a consistent data. Just imagine I'm buying a mobile phone which has a very different requirement, whereas I'm buying a cornflakes which has entirely different requirement, and still I have the same interface. You want me to walk through the entire set of detail and expect me to buy something. So if I want to have a glance on mobile phone, I would look for the RAM and storage space and all. But in cornflakes, the requirements are different. So having an entire information in the same format, it's not really a correct approach to do it. But I'll just take the step ahead of how we are talking about data set. See, it's not just about interpreting what data it is, but also building relationships between data. And how do you interpret the relationship between the data is also very, very important. And while we may be using the current set of tools, which is mobile phones and laptops, frankly, we should, and especially purely talking from a CivicDataLab perspective or similar organizations, it would be very good to really look at newer technologies of how we can make sense of data a lot better. So for instance, virtual reality is a very new platform, or rather it's not a new platform, but in Indian context it is still a very new platform. So why not utilize that platform to really make a lot more sense to the data that we have, and especially when the data points are in sets of millions or maybe more than 10 millions also. So maybe these software platforms are very limited in terms of the providing an overview of what data we have. We should leverage upon these newer technologies, given that they are getting cheaper day by day, and not limited to software, because we will never realize by the time these virtual reality headsets become your sunglasses or your specs. It's just a matter of 2 to 3 years where everything will be on your specs, right? And Google did an experiment. Of course, they failed it, but but I'm sure within 2-3 years we will have such platforms. So it would be very interesting to see such newer technologies being used for data exploration. And I'll tell you one very interesting example. Government was very, and I'm sure other governments also, the government of Assam was very keen on having this data visualization on the COVID management of the entire state, and that I'm talking about during the first wave. And the only idea that they had is 5 यहाँ पे बड़े screen लगेंगे और उसमें से एक बड़ा graph होगा. So I know the whole understanding of the data is कि बड़ा graph होगा. So, and I'm not criticizing them, and they are wonderful friends of mine. Okay, so I'm someone hears me, they'll keep me, but yeah. So, but the point being, it is that it's not their job. It's our job to really put data across or put solutions in such a way that they can really make sense out of data, right? So that project did not materialize, but I know Karnataka used that same project where they had kind of a war room where you can see all the COVID-related data and all. But yeah, that's something, an opportunity for all of us to really build platforms that are a lot more user-friendly and use technologies which are a lot more effective as compared to maybe using with a traditional set of technologies.
Thank you, sir. I would like to ask.
Can I add something?
Yeah, please, sir. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think I completely agree with what Manisha said about thinking of this as a guidelines, as a pattern. Basically, I'm thinking, that why the heck we should compare this so-called online shopping or online purchase platforms and taking some kind of guidelines or thinking that they are really good. Actually, the relationship, if you see, it's a very commoditized relationship. Okay, you go, you buy, you forget, you don't care unless you have some stomachache or something. Otherwise, you are good to go, you can return. But the relationship with such kind of schemes or, let me give one example. Okay, LIC of India. Okay, as I said, I haven't worked into the serious domains in the world of government like healthcare. But LIC of India, have you done any time premium payment of LIC of India? So if you see, and that the trigger, I found when Manisha said patterns, okay, they are thinking of certain patterns, okay, and the way, and I would urge if you can go and make some payment in terms of LIC, कुछ तो देना EMI देना है premium करना है. So they have thought of so many ways of making payment, so many ways. That shows the inclusivity, that shows the communication they want to establish with the beneficiaries and users, and that is very serious business as compared to, if I may use, I know it's a live and streaming, but Zomato's and Book My Shop, Book My Tree, whatever, ticket and all such. So the relationship is fairly tactical, though they can have trending and they can say, hey Kiran, you have gone with your wife to a movie last month and do you really want to go? But this is for business. But this seriousness, I think if we at all want to compare with British government what they are doing, US government what they are doing, I don't know, I haven't done a lot of work, so I'm not prescribing, but something, what patterns and what pattern language they are following. Can we take some best practices from them? Can we have some guidelines from them? And that could be more interesting for us, to follow, and we can come up with our own language, visual language and design language for entire set of platforms in the government.
Is it okay if I still jump in? Just two
Yes,
lines?
please, ma'am.
Hello?
Yes,
Is
ma'am,
it okay
please.
if I jump in a little bit?
Please go ahead.
Yeah, so I think to answer your question, Jatin, I think in broad ways, product design that we all has aged over time. We've figured out how to do things, and it's taken decades and a lot of work to do that. Data as data, right? As raw form, something to productize or something to platform, something for accessibility, something to make your life better is pretty nascent. Okay, and I think we need to still figure out what we can do. So data for information is one way of looking at it. I just want information of what's happening, right? That's a good thing to do. But data for decision, that could be another way of managing and working through a platform. And data for simulation, what can happen later on? I mean, even using technologies like AR or VR, okay, and we use platform VR and with IoT. I think that simulation will help us do a lot many things better. And I think if we all look at our task flows as not task flows but narratives to do something, right? To get an outcome. I think we'll be able to lock in the starting point very well. Okay, and we are all looking at data at if you ask a normal citizen, we are looking at governance and civic data or even tech for that matter with a certain amount of distrust. So we really have to work as trust, transparency and well-being, right? And most of the times we refrain from putting these as goals because we think we can't quantify them. How do I say that my design has evoked trust, and I can't measure it? But I think today with emotion mapping tech, we can quantify that data. So I think more than looking at what we can do as tactical data, we need to look at people-centric and emotion as goals, and then work backwards towards it, and work civic platform. And civic tech is necessary. If we have to grow somewhere as governance and people, it's necessary. But if we look at it from the citizen point of view, and reach out to the governance rather than top down, right? I think we will be making headway to consume data and make data sets for somebody else to use. That's kind of my point. So people coming to Bombay and staying here, it's difficult to get around Bombay. Now that's a civic tech problem, right? And there's so many legislations in societies and there's no one place we can get this data. And it's a necessity today. And how can we facilitate that through governance? I think that might be some problems to solve in where civic tech is concerned.
Thank you, Manisha ma'am. So we have a virtual, we have a question from the virtual participant on YouTube. So the person is asking, what scope or limitation do you see on digital tools for social transformation in India, where digital tech is out of reach for large population? Are they largely monitoring tools instead of participator? Would any of the panel member like to take this?
Okay. Well, they are monitors to some extent, but we can make them participatory. And to answer the question, digital tools are not limiting, and rural India is not inhibited through tech. The way we use, I think we are doing the project, and that's how I know. So if I have a smartphone to myself, it's an individual smartphone. Rural India has a family smartphone, and all the rest of the persuasive technologies go for a toss, but they do use a community smartphone. So I think somewhere we have to say that there is a means to drive certain things to the marginalized society in cities or in rural towns. So it's possible to bring it, and it's possible to be participatory. So a small experiment that we have done with Anganwadis, with the rudimentary phone where you actually have to type. So the participation can start from this point, but if you do not design the platform, the solution or the software to engage a two-way communication by also seeing what does the user want and what is he willing to divulge as information, we will not be able to make the two-way. So I really don't think technology is an innovator. It is how we are seeing that particular project or that challenge to solve is maybe limiting. If we widen our scope and be more people-centric and context-centric, I think we'll be able to find ways to, through these limited means as well, is what I'm saying. Even if people could solve their iron problems by just putting iron in their neck and then dropping it into their water, is a very simplistic solution to help, I think, rickets, if I'm not mistaken. I think we can do a lot with the little bit of tech that we have that reaches these people. It's about how we see and design the solution.
Just 2 bits quickly. So I don't think we have the digital tech is out of the reach of large population. Frankly, we have 120 crore mobile phones with out of 120 crore or 120 crore phone connections and maybe 65 crore smartphones in India. It's a lot in number, okay? And especially when Manisha is saying that they are being used as a community phone, so which means the reach of the technology is there. The other part is digital tech is not just about smartphone. Any phone is eventually a digital technology, or rather there are more examples than just smartphones about the technology. But my understanding is how do we really design these digital technologies is very important. So if you look at smartphone usage, in India, the large amount of usage of panwalas or grocery shops is TikToks and Facebooks, and so it's not that they are not consuming data. They are immensely consuming data. It's just a matter of we not designing solutions like Facebooks and TikToks to really have the data or have them participating into the ecosystem, which maybe these Facebooks and TikToks are doing it really very well. So largely our usage is towards entertainment. So I'm just throwing a small option over here. So why not we make these ecosystems so gamified or so TikTok type, that people are hooked to it, and we are very as in the citizens become participatory of all the government initiatives and just Facebooks or TikToks, right?
Yeah, there is one term, and we all can think of. This is silent designers. So these are the silent designers, who actually have got a lot of ideas. They may not have professional background, they may not have done MTES or MTES, but these silent designers can really contribute in the ecosystem, and they can come up with very interesting ideas as well, because they are consumers, and I'm sure they will have a lot of ideas on improving various systems and services and applications. That will be one of the steps.
Thank you, Kiran sir. So I'm just coming to my last question, and this question I would really be interested if the entire panel answers this. So we know that civic tech is growing in India, and as you all mentioned, like Professor Keyur mentioned, Manisha mentioned that we are still better than last 10 years, and we'll get better at this. But in this entire growth of civic tech, how do you see the design ecosystem, or the way we have design in the private sector, which has already flourished, how you see design ecosystem growing in this space as well? If you could just answer that.
Does anyone want to go first? Because I don't know really what to answer on this.
We should give you the priority. You are in person. We are just videos.
No, ma'am, come on. No, Manisha ma'am, you guys, as in Kiran and you ma'am, have a lot more experience than probably what I can even think of. Yeah, I really don't know. I think you should answer that. I really cannot think of anything right now.
I want to give you a story if that can help, right? One of my projects as a student in IDC, and I don't want to state that because that really does you how old I am. Not that I have a problem with that. But 30 years ago, I did a project. It was the Olympics, and I did a project of showing Olympics in a different way through data and diagrams, right? So I remember and I used to go every day to Indian Express to give them to publish it, right? And in one of them, it was a medal tally, and I remember that very well. I had pegged the data, the number of medals onto the population. Okay? That is how the triangulation was happening, and Suriname was the topmost in the medal tally. What really happened with this is, you could see the difference that, a small country like Suriname could also get it. Actually, they had got only one gold medal, right? So what I'm trying to drive at from then to now, okay, we actually have companies that are doing data, and we are looking at, because of the permeation of technology everywhere, where data analytics is become a big thing, statistics from data has become a big thing, and data and design has come together. We are not doing information graphics, but actually designing big data as a framework, right? Putting behaviors in it, cognitive science in it, and so on and so forth, for the well-being, of course. I keep wanting to say that. I think we have treaded a long way. So I would really say that there is huge possibilities, okay? Like we as a school have 2 courses of data visualization and data design, right? As a part of our foundation years, like 2 years that students that they before they do the projects. So I think we have come a long way, and it's an opportunity that we can actually work with and have civic tech also come in the mix, because we should use governance for greater good, right? That's point one. My point two is, today is the age of ecosystems. Okay, we don't do similar products, we rarely do that. It's a part of a huge ecosystem, right? It could be inter-ecosystem or it's one ecosystem. Now all that, those are data points. So if I had to upgrade my product, 30 years ago, I had to do my user study again. But today, with certain data points that are captured, I know what is not working, what is working. Maybe handle is not used, I can just not have the handle in the IT product, maybe the colors are not used, nobody is answering to me. If the emotion is not triggered, and I can go work on it. So I think subtly design has played, data has played a pivotal role on how we are building. Now the third stage that I see now is data becoming the design itself. Okay, so from information to having data to improve a product to being data as the design itself. I think that's where we are located, and we are doing good work internationally as well, and I'm really proud to say that CivicDataLab is doing it in India. There are other companies like Ramner is there, and there are more profit companies as well doing that. And isn't that itself illustration that there is a huge opportunity? It's just that whether designers see it as a product that they want to design with data, or data as product. Okay, and yeah, I mean, I am very, very excited about it. And there's no time that is exciting as it is today for people who love data and love to see patterns in data and want to create awareness by showing those patterns, say, hey, you need to make the right decision, right? So I think, yeah, that is just right. Yeah, that's my answer. It makes sense.
I can add like +1, like in WhatsApp we do, +1. That means I agree. But I thought like, this is like a very good, nice. But I think designers are really failing to speak the language of what government wants. Okay? So they are into their own world, and government is also into their own world. What does IAS want? Okay, what are these key priorities? I don't think though there are some courses happening and this and that, but in IT industry, the UX designer plays a role between a technology team and a product manager. One who can understand the vision of a product manager, and he can help translating that vision into tangible or intangible solutions, leveraging the technology. In terms of civic data, the PMO or ministry or any legislative bodies or IS officers, the language they are talking, the priorities they are setting, the kind of a broader perspective they are having, and designers, whatever we say, we work in a system design, service design, ecosystem. Many times, these are so Gita words, absolutely Gita. Right from year one, where they are talking about UX strategy, ecosystem, dynamically changing, interlinked systems and services and whatnot. But still, there is no seed for designers in the entire decision-making process. So I'm also very optimistic, nice to say, wonderful, this is a great opportunity for, but there is some missing link. And we really need to fix that missing link. That, hey, there is something that we all need to do together, wherein the priorities of that. That's why when I asked Manisha ma'am, are those projects which are being done at NMIMS are student-led or industry-led? When it becomes student-led, we really need to know, is it a priority? Otherwise, we'll be making 10 different trips to that DMCs of the world. And this is not happening here, everything. I was taking one session for another design. And they are also talking about, let's give some social project, government projects. But are we really giving the projects which are really needed by the government? Like National Innovation Cell and this kind of hackathons are happening where various design schools are participating. So that gap is what is stopping. Otherwise, future is bright and we are doing really awesome things and all that. So as a platform, I'll just take one more minute, and I'm sure Manisha was also there. When we completed 50 years of IDC, okay, and we had invited one IAS officer. Again, I know it's a live streaming, but this is the fact of life. Okay, and she was there in that conference for hardly 1 or 2 hours. And we said, hey, this is fantastic, great guys, but I don't know what you guys are talking about. Okay? So this is something we really need to do as a designers, and this is what I thought. I don't know whether this was the answer to the question, but I thought like this is what we all should be concerned about. And if civic data is thinking of design as one of the pillars, like technology and civic. If we want to strengthen this pillar, there has to be some kind of a sensitization workshops or road shows, I don't know what, but some outsourcing, there can be multiple ways. We guys are crazy, we can come up with multiple ways to bridge the gap between what government wants and what design can offer.
Okay, so I was actually going to mention this point, so I'll just say +1. No, but so I agree with what Kiran is saying. So yeah, we are so designers have this problem that we are always in our silos, thinking that everything is hunky-dory. Or I also say, again, we are on live, but now everyone has taken liberty. Let me also take liberty. Even we say it about IITs also. Professors are happy in their AC cabins and in their residential complex, so comfortable life. We always say that, in India we live in Europe. So it's that kind of a structure that we are into. So the problem with that is we are sort of disconnected from the ground reality. We don't know what really happens outside, what challenges people are facing, and I often say to my students, the difference is, right, still we are a country at a stage where we are talking about roti kapda makan, whereas others are entirely talking about different ball games. So I'll tell you one very simple example of my student who went to Harvard for her master's. So she said that she did a project management course, and during that they were supposed to come up with some kind of a problem statement. She said that people from India, and there were 1 or 2 people from Kenya and some people from US and so on. So the US people had, as in the Western students from Western country had a problem saying that I have to wait for Starbucks. I have to wait for 5 minutes in the Starbucks line. And people from Kenya and India had a different. So the point is that we are entirely in the problem statements are very, very different from these 2 geographies altogether. And I think we really need to teach our students that we probably should go out of our own design, or not students, even ourselves also, and out of that design cocoon, and then maybe talk in language where people can understand, and not just government executives, but even the computer engineers, to management people, to everyone. So that when we talk, there is a common language that takes place, and people understand what we can do and what we can contribute. Because I agree, a lot of times, bureaucrats do not understand what we are really talking about. So if it is not converted into their own language, then the importance of what really design can do for data, or in general any kind of solutions, is something that they will not be able to visualize. So yeah, while I agree that the design probably is a pillar right now, or maybe it's a very important aspect of having data visualization or similar domain growing in the current state, but it's still, it needs to go out of its cocoon and really talk to people in their own language.
Thank you, Professor Keyur. Thank you, Kiran sir and Manisha ma'am. I think, yeah ma'am.
Nupura, I just want to say something. I'm a die-hard optimistic, right? I mean, that's how I survived, I think, the last 30 years. I really feel that, Keyur, was doing something with the government. Yes, he said that that's what they thought data कुछ pie chart लगा के and we are making, but there is a step forward that they are looking. They are wanting to see a visualization. This whole conference of data dialogues with the Assam government, I think it's a step forward, right? I mean, if you don't, I think the pathway is open, right? So somebody was saying 3 decades of design, right? I really feel that the pathway is open. I agree with Dr. Keyur that we need to talk their language. And that's the reason why the courses at NMIMS has business, tech, design, and science, right? We need to talk all these languages. So we can't talk about how I process this whole thing. We're saying, hey, what is in it for me? Okay, that's the question any government, any corporate, anybody, even an NGO asks. So, okay, you want to do this, but what is it going to do to my people? How is it going to help my people? I think we can quantify how design can help it. The pathway will open, and it is open.
Yeah, just maybe one point. Was someone speaking? No, I agree with Manisha ma'am. So I'm not pessimistic at all. It's just that I'm giving a little realistic picture. But having said that, which I consistently always say is really there is a huge push from the government on and off positives. It's just that they don't know how they don't know the language. That's the only thing, and that's where we need to come in and build that ecosystem.
So let me just say that in short, in 2024, it would be सबका साथ, सबका विकास, सबका design पे विश्वास. If such kind of thing happen in the world, then we are really going to progress. Okay, thank you guys, thank you so much.
Thank you Kiran sir, thank you Manisha ma'am, thank you Professor Keyur. I think we can definitely strive together to bring design communities closer to government and probably form a language which is more suitable for both the organizations. Thank you for giving time for today's session and sharing your valuable inputs. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
We are running a bit late, so just a quick vote of thanks is needed, and I think this was our first data dialogue, so I would just quickly read something which I penned down. So on behalf of CivicDataLab, I would really like to extend our gratitude to all our keynote speakers, panelists, and participants for the last 2 days of rich discussion. This whole thing, we are glad that this happened in this form of consultation way. Both in person and other participants virtually were able to join. So this is really helpful. This really helped us on guiding us how open data can be, much more become mainstream in Assam, and we can have more stakeholders coming together, explore more opportunities to work together to make open data related use cases, data driven use cases much more popular in the state, improve the lives and the livelihoods of Assam, forcing new ways of thinking towards data. This was our very first data dialogues, and we hope this becomes a regular event series. It doesn't become one of its kind, but it becomes a regular thing to strengthen the data for good discourse in the country. We hope Assam will become a strong example for other states in India to follow, and it goes beyond India as well, on how a diverse group of stakeholders, including government officials, civil society organizations, academicians, researchers, designers, can come together to shape data-driven decision making. We'd like to thank you, our keynote speakers, all our panelists, facilitators, for sharing their valuable insights on Assam's data ecosystem, giving their precious time to us, both physically and online. We would like to thank our co-organizer, Open Government Data Project Management Unit at NIC. We'd like to extend our gratitude to Assam Administrative Staff College for hosting us, sharing their facilities with us, Hotel Shulin Grant for serving us delicious lunch and tea, Systems and Service Group for making sure everything got streamed online as well, so that other participants can join us as well. and various local entrepreneurs who helped us create this event, goodie bags and other resources. Lastly but definitely not the least, a big thanks to all my bandhus from CivicDataLab who came from different geographies from Jammu to Kerala to Guwahati and put an insane number of hard work in last couple of weeks to make this happen. From a vaguely defined idea to a very engaging series, we are able to make this as a model which could be replicated. We hope to release a detailed event report in coming weeks, which could be disseminated and could be formulated as something which we can extend to other states, other geographies. And we hope that these kind of conversations would strengthen the data forward ecosystem in Assam and other geographies. Thanks a lot, everyone.